Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will commence the North Sydney Local Planning Panel meeting. We are still waiting on one panel member to join us, but I will commence by just outlining the procedures for today. We have 6 matters on the agenda to consider this afternoon, and as you are aware, this is an independent planning panel in that we come together once a month, different membership of the panel, it may be from time to time, and we have 4 people that make a determination and consideration of your development applications. The panel, given that we're still slightly under the overhang of COVID, we have been visited the sites on our own to understand the context in which the sites are and to understand the concerns of submitters and applicants alike. Thank you. Veronique has now joined us. So I will just briefly introduce myself. I'll ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves and to indicate whether they have a conflict of interest on any of the items. My name's Jen Morell. I've been a town planner for some 40 years. The last 10 years I have chaired and been an expert member on local planning panels. Prior to that, I was a commissioner with the Land Environment. Us introduce themselves. I will indicate at this stage I do have a conflict of interest. It's only a perceived potential conflict of interest. I have no significant or pecuniary interest in item number 1, but I will, given our strict adherence to conflicts of interest, I will step aside and I will ask Carolyn Pidcock to chair that part of the meeting. That is for item number 1. I will also indicate that we have 2 of the 6 items on the agenda that qualify for the public meeting, and the public meeting will be heard in respect of items 1 and 2 only, and then they will be just in the general closed session of the panel with each of the applicants and submitters. So the first 2 items qualify because they have had more than 10 submissions received in respect of when they were exhibited and notified. So that will occur. Can I invite Lloyd to introduce himself? You're on mute, Lloyd. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Lloyd Graham is my name. I have a background in town planning and economic research. Most of my career was in Western Australia, where I worked for the state government, and also on the Town Planning Appeal Tribunal in that state. Since being in New South Wales, I've sat on a number of local government planning panels, and I conduct my own planning consultancy from home. Thank you.
And conflicts?
No conflicts of interest.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Hi, Caroline Pidcock. I'm an architect specialising in sustainable built environments. I've been president of the Institute of Architects and the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, member of the Australian Building Codes Board, and a number of other things. I've also lectured at many universities, and I participate in a number of design and sustainability and planning panels. I have one conflict of interest with number 85 Carraba Road, which, as Jan has said, it's a non-pecuniary, whatever. It's not a major one, but I will be stepping aside and for that matter.
Thank you, Caroline. And Veronique? You're on mute, Veronique. Just while she's unmuting, we do tend to ask people to put themselves on mute when they're not speaking because we don't want to overload the system too much. Thank you, Veronique.
Hi, I'm good. Yeah, I'm Veronique Marchando. I'm the community representative member on this panel. I'm a resident of North Sydney. I was an old councillor. I have legal and planning qualifications, and thank you for the opportunity of joining the panel.
Thank you.
And I have no conflict of interest on any of the matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so given my brief introduction, and also I will just comment to the effect that Once the panel has considered all the matters today in the meeting, the public meeting and the following meeting, we will then be adjourning to a private session, and we will be making a determination on each of the development applications. And in that regard, the panel endeavours to have its reports on the internet by close of business on Friday. If not, it may occur the following Monday, so that they are made in a timely manner. So with that, I'll allow Carolyn Pitcock, and I'll ask the Secretariat, Peter, to exclude me from the meeting and just give me a ring when the item number 2 comes up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Well, I think we'll start with the people who've made submissions, and I'll ask you to keep your presentations to 5 minutes if that's possible, and then we'll go on to the applicant to be able to respond. So I have on my list Brendan Hull, Daniel Bryant, Craig Bryant, Tina Christie, and then Steve Isaacs. Is that correct? Is there anyone else who's hoping to present? Nope. Okay, on that basis we'll start with you, Brendan, as I said, if you could keep it to about 5 minutes, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Caroline. I've had the benefit of reading the submissions that are to be made by Daniel Bryant and Craig Bryant, and I believe that they will show, and have shown in their written submissions, that there are several non-compliances with the relevant planning controls, and the relevant building proposal results in a devastating loss of views from my apartment, which is Unit 1421 Wairua Street, and other apartments at number 21, and also from public viewpoints as one walks down the gradient of King George Street. The planning panel in its December 2021 reasons highlighted the need to consider the objectives provided in clause 4.3 of the NSLEP, and I will concentrate on that aspect. Although, can I hasten to add, I agree with everything that Craig and Daniel will be addressing you on shortly. Regarding objective 4.3a, which is to promote development that conforms to and reflects natural landforms by stepping development on sloping land to follow the natural gradient. The natural gradient is evident from the slope of King George Street, the 2013 North Sydney Contour Map Survey, which I've included in my written submission, and the historical photographs of the site prior to its development, which were all set out in one of Daniel's earlier submissions. The proposed development is not reflective of this natural landform and does not step down the site. The current submission describes how the development, quote, nestles into the existing excavation, unquote. There is nothing natural about an excavation. The current submission continues to ignore the natural landform. Regarding clause 4.3b, which is to promote the retention and, if appropriate, sharing of existing views. The impact on existing views was only addressed after the original DA was submitted to the council. The view sharing consultant has concluded that the proposed development is reasonable and supported on view sharing grounds, despite this consultant failing to recognise the catastrophic views losses that are demonstrated in the documents. Just as a personal example, the photos of the proposed building superimposed onto images taken from the living room of Unit 14 demonstrate that we completely lose our view of the Opera House and the roadway of the Harbour Bridge. And could I say, one of my family really enjoys watching the trains going over that part of the Harbour Bridge. In circumstances where there is a severe impact on existing views, the present building proposal should be considered unreasonable. Applying the fourth tenacity principle, even if the proposal complied, where there is an impact on existing views, especially iconic ones from living spaces, a more skillful design should have been considered to reduce the impact on the views of neighbours. I had hoped, after the planning panel's decision in December last year, that a more skillful design would have been considered to take into account not only the various non-compliances, but the impact that any design would have on the private and public views affected by any development of this block, which, might I say, has stood in its present form for about 100 years. In my view, the current proposal and the reports that support it do not test whether the development complies with the objectives of clause 4.3. Instead, the planning consultant continues to focus on artificial measures of ground level existing, which are not relevant to the objectives of this clause. Indeed, there has been very little design change at all. Thank you, panel.
Thank you very much for a very timely presentation. Now,
You're welcome.
oh, there's Siri saying thank you. Now, next is Daniel Bryant. And Daniel, please be as timely as your predecessor.
Sure, I'll do my best. I've got some material, so I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Can I just confirm, I don't think, has this presentation been, has council been able to review and check this, or?
This is a presentation that reflects the supporting documentation that I provided.
Terrific, thanks very much.
No worries. So good afternoon, panel. My name is Daniel Bryant, and I am the owner of Unit 17, 21 Waiwera Street. And my unit has iconic views of the Harbour Bridge, and these views will be devastated by the proposed development. Now, I do understand that part of the reason I enjoy the views that I do today is because it looks through an underdeveloped site. I understand as part of the development of the site, I will potentially lose some so that the site can be properly developed or benefited from. I guess my concern is this development doesn't actually comply with the North Sydney LEP and DCP. And this is not only causing me view loss, it's actually exacerbating that view loss. So following the December planning panel meeting, I was relieved to read the decision and recommendations made by the panel. And I felt the concerns of the community that were not appropriately considered in the independent planners report had been heard by this panel. However, I feel the recommendations made by this panel have not in any way been addressed by the applicant or heard by the independent planner. So the panel requested revised height compliance diagrams based on an accurately determined existing ground level. But we still have inaccurately determined existing ground levels. There's a subfloor space beneath the terrace identified through a hatch in the floor. And this, and I guess the applicant would be aware of this if they'd visited the site to establish the ground levels before submitting the revised plans that they did in December. And I'd urge the panel to really ask, the architect, Mr. Isaacs, why no revised on-site survey has been performed, given the request by the panel that accurate ground levels be determined. In fact, last time we were here before the panel, challenging the applicant's ground levels, Mr. Isaacs said he stood by his ground levels. Yet after this meeting, the levels have been changed to new ground levels, and these are also inaccurate. So given the continued errors that we see around ground levels, how can we rely on those that are being provided by the applicant? If we refer to the new subfloor levels that are referred to by the applicant, it's unclear who has prepared these. There's been no new survey provided by the applicant. So I'm not sure if a suitably qualified professional has prepared this documentation. But even if we accept that it has been, if you look at the ground levels of the earth under the ground floor, that's considered to be 18,870. and then the ridge line is 27,387. And if we subtract those two numbers, we end up with 8.517 meters, which is above the height limit, and certainly not the 8.3 meters that the report by the independent planner claims is the maximum height of the building. I have made a written representation to address in detail the 5 other requests of the planning panel and why I don't think that they've been addressed by the applicant. But to briefly summarise, the panel requested barbecues and cabinetry be removed, and they weren't. The panel requested the balcony blades be deleted, and they weren't. The panel requested the basement be decreased in size, or at least consider decreasing it in size. And the applicant has flat out refused because they consider the basement compliant. And this is a basement that requires excavation to 5.9 meters, which is over 10 times the excavation permitted in the DCP, which is a maximum of 0.5 meters. And this is to accommodate basement parking, which is also not permitted by the DCP. Finally, the panel requested the applicant consider setting back the development to the 4.2 meters required by the DCP. And what the applicant has done is maintain the existing setback at less than half of that, about 2 meters, on a prominent corner block. And then what they've done is they've placed on the view analysis lines a representation of the setback that isn't the true compliant setback. The true compliant setback is represented on the other side of this page and is back a further meter from that. That is the compliant setback in line with the window on the ground floor.
Daniel, your 5 minutes is up. Have you got?
Yes, I'm just wrapping up. Thank you.
Right, thanks.
So the applicant has claimed they're unaware of the views that they would obstruct when they created their original design. And the applicant appears unwilling to make the compromises necessary and the compromises requested by the planning panel to achieve compliance. So I think, therefore, the option left to the panel is to refuse permission for this development and for the applicant to start afresh with a design process that properly considers the iconic views of 21 Wairera Street from the outset, rather than only considering them in retrospect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now we'll move on to, could you unshare the screen, please? And we'll move on to Craig Bryant.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd also like to share my screen if possible, please. It has been submitted to council, the presentation.
Great.
My name's Craig Bryant. I'm also one of the owners of Unit 17 at 21 Wairera Street in Lavender Bay, near to the development site. This is a view from my apartment. There's no tricks involved. The photos haven't been taken by me standing on the toilet or looking through between buildings or hanging over a balcony. They're taken for that. They haven't been zoomed in views as AK planning has suggested. They're simply views taken from my lounge room. I'm sure you can see Sydney Harbour Bridge there in the middle, one of the iconic views according to the tenacity principles. You can see that we enjoy the view of the entire North Pylons and probably 70% of the span of the bridge. Yeah, there's some growth between my apartment and the bridge, but most of that's deciduous, so it's not there in winter. Equally, New South Wales Trains, who owns the site, regularly clears vegetation away. So at worst, we've got filtered views. At best, we've got pretty much unobstructed views of most of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge. As a result of the proposed development, according to the analysis provided by the applicant, we'll retain views of the Northern Pylons, but then we'll only have probably 20% of the span of the bridge arch. AK Planning has suggested that such a loss of iconic views is moderate, while such opinions clearly are subjective. It's difficult to see how the loss of such a major part of the bridge could be considered moderate. While we accept that the applicant is entitled to develop the site, surely we've got the right to expect that the applicant will comply with all relevant planning controls, particularly when those have a direct impact on the iconic views that we currently enjoy. Surely that's not too much to ask. As you've heard, the current proposal is non-compliant in many ways. Roof form, basement parking, terrace size and location, all of these contribute to the loss of view from surrounding spaces. But today I want to focus on just one, which is the setback to Bayview Street. The DCP is very clear as to how a front alignment is to be calculated. Set out there, front setback must match the alignment of the primary facades of buildings on adjoining properties where different setbacks occur. The average of the setbacks for those is to be used. AK Planning has calculated the required setback to be 4.15 metres. The applicant, via Guide Consulting, has proposed that the setback should be different. It should be less than that. It should follow this big, thick line that they've drawn on this map here. Now, while this line does hide much detail, you can see that the front of the left-hand side of the line aligns with the front of number 38, whereas the buildings at numbers 20 and 18 both protrude clearly through the line on the right-hand side. So clearly that line isn't following the alignments of the buildings. AK Planning has pointed that out, and you can see there is a line that AK Planning have drawn, which follows that alignment. AK Planning suggests that line is a setback of around 4 metres here. So on any basis, the setback to Bayview Street is non-compliant, should be at least 4 metres, not the 2.1 metres at the ground level, and definitely not the 1.6 metres at the first floor terrace level. The DCP is clear not only on how it needs to be calculated, but why the setback needs to be calculated. And it's to preserve the amenity of existing dwellings and provide amenity to new dwellings in terms of shadow and privacy, views, ventilation and solar access. The planning panel back in December asked for further consideration to be given to the possibility of increased views if the building was set back in accordance with the DCP. AK Planning claims that additional view analysis allowing for a 4.1 metre setback to Bayview Street in order to demonstrate the impact on views has been prepared. If that's the case, the analysis seems not to have made it into the package of information provided to the planning panel. No analysis is provided for the case of a development that complies with a 4.1 metre setback. All that's provided is the existing view analysis with an orange dashed line showing the apparent compliance setback. But there's two problems with this. As Daniel has already pointed out, that orange dashed line is in the wrong place. It's projected onto the boundary of the development site and not onto the facade of the building. So due to the parallax error, the line is well forward of where it should be if it was showing the true setback, required setback to Bayview Street. In AK Planning's previous report, you can see this line here, which is the 4.1 metre setback that has been calculated as appropriate. It runs through the downstairs window. That's the downstairs window here. That dashed line is simply in the wrong place.
Hello, Craig. Just to let you know, you've gone 5 minutes. Is there much further to go?
There is a little, unfortunately. I'll be quick to get to the end. There's been no analysis provided, as I said, of a compliant development. But AK Planning does say it is acknowledged that a compliant ground floor setback would not significantly increase iconic views, noting that the only additional views that would be available to surrounding development would be the views of 37 Bayview Street, with the exception of Unit 17, which would retain more of the Sydney Harbour Bridge due to the angled view. That's my apartment. They're acknowledging that there is view loss caused by this lack of setback to my apartment. Surely Guide or AK Planning have discussed in their documentation why I should sacrifice iconic views so the government of New South Wales can build a non-compliant house. Why should I obtain views to which I have a right only through a gaggle of guests congregated on the governor's non-compliant terrace? But there is nothing justifying this. I'll just close with a final slide. tenacity principle number 4, which Mr. Hull has referred to, where an impact on views arises as a result of non-compliance with one or more planning controls, even moderate impact may be considered unreasonable. All we've ever asked for is that this development be required to comply with the relevant planning controls. Thank you. I'm sorry I've gone over time.
Thank you very much, Craig. Now we'll go on to Tina Christie from Town Planner from Guide.
Thank you, panel. I've got myself today, obviously, and Stephen Isaacs, the architect, is here today to answer questions. So we'll actually split the answers between us. I might just deal with the view loss, and then I'll ask Steve to talk about the survey detail survey information in more detail, and also the setback to Bayview Street. I was going to show the diagrams that the occupants of numbers 14 and 17 have showed with regards to the view analysis. If that's okay, can I share my screen?
Yep.
Has it come up? Well,
yep.
Okay, so this is the view analysis that we prepared for the apartment number 14. Now, the portion of balcony that we're talking about is very clear in the information that we submitted. The portion of balustrade that we're talking about is this portion here. We'll come back to as I said, we'll discuss the issue of setback and everything in a minute. But as far as we're concerned, the building, despite the roof form, does comply with the height. I guess I just want to take a step back. It's important that everyone understands at the moment, there's a single story building here, which is represented by a pink line. The site does allow a 2-story building to be built. So there is going to be some impact on views. Having said that, everyone needs to consider obviously the view sharing objectives, and we're not disputing that at all. The height line is shown up here. The roof form, despite the unusual shape, does comply. The whole building at every point does comply with the 8.5 metre height limit. We have provided additional survey details, which, as I said, Stephen will discuss that in more detail in a minute. The portion of balcony that we're talking about is this portion in red here. We believe that whether you push the building back or whether you make this clear or keep it a solid or whatever, this portion of balcony, the impact on the view loss is minimal. And I guess we'll agree to disagree on that. We believe it's minimal. That's for apartment 14. For apartment 17, depending on which view you take it from, again, which window from apartment you take it from, we're talking about this portion of balcony here. And then at this stage, we're talking about this portion of balcony here. We do acknowledge that it does remove a partial view of part of the Harbour Bridge. However, the reason why, I'll just stop sharing, the reason why that balustrade was made solid was to ensure the privacy of the occupants of the dwelling, given particularly the steep nature of the site as you come down King George Street. When you weigh up the fact that those views are across a side boundary, the balustrading is providing privacy for the occupants, and the view loss caused from that portion of balustrading is very minimal. You're still seeing the main iconic parts of the relevant features. We believe that the loss of view is considered acceptable when you take into account why that balustrading has been provided in the first place. As people walk down the steep nature of King George Street, they're going to see onto that balcony, that terrace, whatever you want to call it, for the proposed dwelling. So there needs to be some privacy formed there. And as we highlighted, the portion of view loss that is lost from that balustrading being solid versus see-through is minimal. There's no other word for it. We believe that you've got to understand the dwelling itself is lower in bulk and scale than adjoining dwellings. If I can just show this, oh, sorry, not sharing it. Hang on, let me share. You'd think after all this time we'd be used to it. Why is that not coming up? The comment, where are we? The comments that were made about the building not stepping down the street. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so this is how the building with the amendments, this is how the building will sit in relation to what is adjoining. You can tell that it's significantly lower in bulk, in scale, and it complies with height. Not only does it comply with height, but it achieves the other controls that the council has with regards to unbuilt upon landscaping, site coverage. It complies with all of those criteria that actually dictate how big and how excessive a building can go to. This proposal has been, in our view, skillfully designed to take into account what is surrounding. It's preserved the privacy of what is surrounding, and it does take into account the impact on the properties on both sides. You can see this is in Bayview Street. You can see the size of the dwellings that are next door. This is quite small in relation to those adjoining dwellings. The other things that I wanted to comment on was...
Tina, you've gone 5 minutes, so if you just keep it.
Okay, yep. All right, all right, I'll be real quick. With regards to the basement, we had a traffic engineer look at the basement. In order to get the cars to manoeuvre into and out of the site in a forward motion, we need the turning area that we've got. The DCP, Council's DCP does actually allow for basements in scenarios where they don't affect the landscaping, the unbuilt upon, the site coverage. We comply with all of that, as I've just said. We've designed the basement so that the entry is at the lowest point of the site to reduce it, to improve the access in, and also have less of an impact on the sandstone wall that no one really wants that touched. So the basement's actually been designed specifically to consider how much of the site is covered, but also where the cars will manoeuvre into and out of in relation to the sandstone wall and the intersection. We need to make sure, obviously, we don't come anywhere near the intersection. So we actually respectfully disagree with the previous comments and that the basement is allowed, the DCP allows it, and it's been designed specifically in accordance with the requirements. Just before Stephen talks about the survey and the setback, I just wanted to make a comment that we believe the dwelling complies in height and council's provisions. We believe the setbacks are actually in alignment with adjoining dwellings, but Stephen will talk to in a minute. The design has been amended to reduce view impacts and allow view sharing. And then there's just a couple of things about conditions. Obviously, we would like the proposed design changes in condition C1 to be deleted, but also condition number 2, which talks about the plan numbering. We need to just, if council can make sure that the numbering of the plans reflects the latest amended plans. I'm not sure that all of those do. So if council can just check that before any consent is issued. So I guess that's all I wanted to say at the moment. I'll pass over to Stephen if he could just discuss the survey and the setback to Bayview Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina, and welcome, Stephen.
Hi, thank you, panel. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. So just for a little bit of context, obviously the site hasn't been developed for decades and decades, and someone said 100 years. So, obviously there'd be an expectation that at some point the site would be developed consistent with what's around there, and that might have some impacts. This application has gone through many changes and adjustments responding to comments from council's planner, from neighbours from the last panel meeting. The height of the building has been reduced substantially so that it is fully compliant with the height control. There've been the corner elements of the metal blade work have been removed as requested by the panel. All the things requested by the panel have been undertaken, other than this question of whether the balustrade should be solid or glass. We feel quite strongly that the effect on the amenity and use of that balcony of having it clear glass exposed to all the people working by is a much more significant impact than that 1.5 square meters of view that might be lost. In terms of the survey levels, so as normal at the start of the project, an extensive survey was done. In response to the panel requests, there was additional, more detailed survey work undertaken in the spaces under the building to try to establish where those ground levels were. The reason, we had done that measurement ourselves in our office, and as we know professional surveyors, we had on the drawings, noted a plus minus level to indicate that there might be some tolerance in there. The surveyor has gone out, checked those, and all those levels are within 10 to 50 millimeters of what we had figured out for ourselves. That has then been modelled in 3D, and the height plane model has been updated to reflect all that information. And that shows, if you look at the, at the additional sections that were provided in this mission, as well as the long section, the building roof sits comfortably below that height plane. In fact, the point on that basically drove how low that roof had to sit is the portion of the site between the old house and the footpath, where there is, and that can be seen on the north elevation, where then you've got the existing footpath, and then it steps up to the porch. So that's actually the lowest point, which then drove everything down, whereas the under the house and in the undercroft, there's quite a bit of tolerance to the height. There's been some comments about ground levels under the porch. We are not aware of there being any access to that space under the porch. The porch is a concrete floor, sitting on dirt, and even if one assumed that there was space under that porch, and which one would assume would be at follow the same levels as under the rest of the house, and if you were to extrapolate that slope under the porch area, the building roof is still within any height control, because the building roof does not sit over those basement undercroft spaces. So we believe there's adequate information provided. The council's assessing officer has reviewed it in detail, come to that same conclusion. So this is a scheme that now complies with the LEP controls. There is some discussion about the front setback, which I'm happy to, sorry, not the front setback, the Bayview Street setback, which I'm happy to address. So in the definition that one of the objectors kindly put up, it talks about the aligning with the general alignment of the neighbours, and where that's not possible to do an average setback. We, as noted before, follow the general alignment. The planner, the independent planner, in their assessment, and as mentioned by the objectors, suggested that a 4.1 metre setback would be more appropriate. If you look at our drawing DA 104, we have clearly dimensioned the setback to the first blade, because we've removed the blades in the corner, and that is 4.611 metres. So it is greater than where if one applied a 4.1 metre setback. Obviously, the terrace sits closer to the street, but that is sitting within, even with that, that is way back from the existing bulk of the building, which goes right to the corner of the street. So the photomontage we produced and the view analyses, clearly show we've actually opened up that corner and reduced the bulk that is apparent on the corner, which will provide a benefit to the general public and people using the area. You can also see from drawing DA 401 that terrace, that terrace sits further back than the terrace on number 38 Bayview Street.
Stephen, you've gone 5 minutes, so
so just in summary, obviously, if the panel has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. In summary, the building is substantially of smaller scale than the neighbouring buildings. We believe it's a sensitive response to the site, and we believe that the principles of view sharing have been applied in the design and all the amendments of the project.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Now I'd like to invite my fellow panel members for any clarifications that they'd like to seek. Lloyd and Veronique.
Oh, yes, Lloyd Graham here. I just wanted to ask a question of Stephen, who was just speaking. In the report before the panel, it talks about measuring existing ground level below the building, and that it has been done in accordance with standard practice. I'm just wondering, Stephen, can you elaborate on that if you're able to?
Yes. So what we did in order to establish, so instead of taking the existing ground level as the floor of the existing house, we actually, because there's a basement room at Bayview Street, and there's a bit of a hole in the retaining wall that holds back all the dirt under the house. We could actually, in this case, ascertain how much below the existing floor level the dirt actually sat, so we could get an accurate indication of how the existing ground slopes under the house, and then that's what's being used. So that's how the process worked, assisted by the surveyor who went and took it. For instance, there's a window to the street, to the part of the property you can't get to. They used laser sights and laser measuring equipment to establish where the retaining wall is and where the levels of the dirt is under there. So way more extensive investigations than would normally, be the case.
Okay.
Sorry, it's Tina here. Could I just possibly elaborate on that, in that there's two schools of thought as to which levels you should use. And as Stephen has correctly explained, because we could get access to find the levels under the dwelling, we did not extrapolate from the footpath, because where you can find the actual levels under the dwelling, that's obviously the more correct way of working out true height.
And also we've got the levels around the building on the site. It's not like it's a fully built out site.
Great. Okay. Anything else, Lloyd?
No, thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of queries. One is, I think there was an issue with the level of excavation to the neighbour to the south. But can you confirm that whether there is on that whether that wall to the south of the entry into the garage is an existing retaining wall, or whether you're doing further excavation at that point?
Okay, so when one approaches, where you drive in from the street, there's an existing retaining wall along the boundary. It's sort of a slight display, and then that returns parallel to the street. So we've maintained, so that portion that's on the boundary is shown in black on our plan, and then the new retaining wall that's further into the site is shown in grey. So there's on the existing site, there's that sort of sloped precast concrete sort of embankment, and then that comes down onto like a base of rock and retaining. So we've kept all of that. We've worked, our engineer has had a look at that. He has provided this as part of the original DA submission. There was a letter from them verifying, that that's there's not going to be impact there. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Secondly, the front entry is off King George Street, but it's quite unclear. Is it possible to open up that entry courtyard and make that front entry clearer?
So what we've tried to create is a sort of transitional space between the street, you know, when you come from the street and before you enter the building. So we've created this courtyard.
But it's a very walled enclosure and just not very clear as to where the entry is. And I just wonder if there's a possibility of even connecting the entry foyer slightly better to the street so that it's more evident.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but we felt that the wall with a opening in it is more consistent with the general streetscape where things are built to the street. And even if you go down along Bayview Street where you got all the heritage stonework, you know, the entrances are sort of, you know, doorways or keyholes within the street wall. So we felt architecturally, you know, that was the appropriate, you know, response. I would disagree, but that's an opinion, I suppose. Now to the point of the setbacks and the views, we were having a discussion prior, and we wondered whether, in the aim of sharing views more, you know, fairly and not compromising the quality or quantity of the spaces, whether there might be an opportunity of moving the rumpus room 1 metre west, which would then put its most northeast 0.3 metres back from the boundary, and in addition to that, on the upper level, shifting the entire terrace so that it's still as useful as it needs to be, say 1 metre south, which would mean then that you could you'd get more privacy from the neighbours by your own building, and you could just have a rooftop over that small section of the rumpus room that's not covered by the terrace. But it also means then you can retain your solid wall, if you like, because it won't be in the view line. I think Annalise has made some very quick sketches. I wonder if you can share those for some discussion or whatever, but it wouldn't change the size or the scale of those rooms, but it could alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbours. Annalise, are you there? Are you able to share that? Or
I can share that I'll grab it for you in a minute.
Very quick work. But I just think that a little bit more shaping and concern there doesn't have to, it's not an either or, it's an and both. And I don't think it would compromise your design, Stephen, or the amenity of your proposal. I just think it would, and I think it might address some of the concerns of the neighbours. So that's
yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm just a bit confused about what it really would achieve, because
it would achieve the views that the people who've just talked about, and I don't see that it would have a big compromise on your design.
I'm just, because where that sits, that's where the existing
Yeah, but it's not existing anymore. It's a brand new house.
Yes, but what one would see if one pulls that wall back at that level is you're just going to see the properties across the road. Because if you look at the views from the various apartments, you know, the views only happen at
I think the demonstrations of the applicants have shown that there is some impact, and I think that the changes are very minor and perhaps more impactful than anyway, it would.
Can I, it's Tina here. Can I
Yep.
maybe make a suggestion that the ground floor not be altered, because it then potentially has structural issues? And as Stephen was saying, the rumpus room doesn't actually affect views, and maybe we could consider the shift to the terrace on the top floor. But to be honest, we're a bit concerned about shifting the ground floor because there would be no material benefit to the neighbours, but there would be.
Well, the terrace could provide a bit of shelter to that wall, a bit of an overhang and shelter. So it's not structurally impossible. Anyway.
No, I guess I was just trying to understand the benefit of shifting the ground floor, but
Yes, I think. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sita. I mean, I'm trying to say it wouldn't create a big benefit, but it would compromise the architectural integrity of.
Well, I think we've heard from others that there would be benefit. I think it would be worthwhile exploring that a bit further in those two regards, because I think that it is a brand new house, and you know, there's many ways you could even shift the whole house further west if you wanted, but there's an idea. So I just think that perhaps a little bit more work on relieving that corner could be achieved. But anyway, we'll leave that to further deliberations, which we will have after this meeting. But I think that you might get a flavour of what we're thinking about.
Sorry, Madam Chair, is that something that could be conditioned if the panel was of the opinion to do that? Given that you've pretty much drawn up what you would like to see anyway, I mean, I was just wondering if that was something that could be conditioned.
I'll have to consult with the staff. One
Sure.
other thing, just on this day as we sit here with unbelievable rain and devastation happening across New South Wales, and the IPCC report that was released yesterday, I think it would be a very good future proofing for you to consider how to make this house not just the bare minimum in basics, but achieve a whole lot more than that to be a bit much more resilient for the future. And I will also suggest going totally electric with renewables powering rather than gas, because I think gas has got to go. Anyway, personal opinion, but just as a bit of advice on these in these terrifying times that we live, that I think architects need to take a bigger step up and can bring clients along on how their buildings can be better. So I don't know what you think about that, Stephen, but it's.
I agree with you fully. Yeah, and definitely, yeah. With gas, we're pushing all our clients to abandon anything.
Yeah.
Are there any solar panels? Sorry, can I ask the question? Are there any solar panels being considered here?
Yeah.
Yes, there are. There are some solar panels on the roof, over the flat portion of the roof that's over the master bedroom and bathrooms. Yeah.
But just electric heat pumps, electric cooking, everything is where we need to go. So
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think on that note, that hopeful note, Stephen,
yes.
bringing your clients into the future in a positive way.
Yes.
We might close this matter, and we will deliberate afterwards. And we understand, Tina, the idea of conditioning things. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we will work out what we can do. And I understand the need to move along quickly and not come back to another panel, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's right, because every panel has its own view of things and its own opinion.
Okay, so if unless anyone else has something urgent they need to say right now, I think we might close that matter and say thank you very much for taking the amount of time you've clearly put into these submissions, and how much you care about the place, and how much time you've put into the design. So I'm sure there's ways we can all move forward and be less unhappy and reasonably happy in what we can get. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks. Bye-bye. And I think on that note, we will welcome back Jan to take over the rest of the meeting. There she is. No, you're on mute, Jan.
Great, thanks very much. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 2. And this is also in the public meeting, and it is for 23 to 27 Weekly Crescent, Crow's Nest, and it's for the development of 10 houses and with a clause 4.6 variation for the height of the variation going up to 1 metre, the control being 8.5. We do have a number of people who wish to address the panel this afternoon. Can I just advise you that we've had the opportunity of reading submissions, and if you could try and limit your submission to 5 minutes for the panel, that would be appropriate. Okay, so we have Brendan Hull of 28 Walker Street. Oh, no, sorry. We have Neil Forbes, 31 Wheatley Street. Neil Forbes there? Yes?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank
That's
you.
good. Thanks,
Please
Jan.
address the panel. Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate the time to speak to the planning panel today. I will try and keep this as brief as possible. Definitely not technical in any means, but just wanted to give some general concerns again for this development. Having resided at number 31 Wheatley Street with my wife and 2 children for the last 23 years, we've obviously seen many changes within our local area in terms of development, and in essence, we understand the nature of progress and what that means for our area, especially with the current infrastructure investments regarding public transport and the advent of increased density of St Leonard's. We personally are not adverse to development in our street, however, it has to be a balance for all concerned. And at this stage, I believe the balance leans very much to the developer with these amended plans, and residents are not being fully informed or heard. I'd like the panel to reconsider the current proposal. Myself and numerous other residents have the following concerns that still need to be addressed. Point 1, total footprint of the 10 units. We would prefer a total of 8 units rather than 10, and ask the panel to reconsider the entire proposal given the current built form and scale. Demolishing 3 single-storey dwellings and replacing with 10 3-storey dwellings seems to me to be overdeveloping a unique site, especially as there is no provision for a better mix of dwellings, i.e. 1 and 2 bedroom units. As it stands, 8 by 4 bedroom and 2 by 3 bedroom units is a concern, especially if they are tenanted. This could mean 4 couples and 8 vehicles from just 1 4-bedroom unit. By amending the mix, reducing the footprint and number of residences of the proposal, this would alleviate some of the immediate neighbours' concerns, especially with regard to the height and non-compliance issues evident, whilst reducing the overall built form to provide better amenity and integration into the street. I also note that the council's assessment does not take into consideration the established R2 houses and gardens on the western side of the street under Willoughby Council control. In terms of point 2, in terms of parking and traffic flow, on paper, it may be possible to squeeze the build onto the block, but in practice, we are removing 3 established large single-storey homes with 3 established driveways on approximately 1,700 square metres that will be demolished and replaced by 10 units, 3 stories high, with only 1 driveway to service the residents. For those of you that are not aware, Wheatley Street is a very narrow street that cannot provide adequate space for 2 cars to pass each other without the need for 1 vehicle to give way and pull over into driveways. It is a one-way entry from the southern end to add to the complexity of the street. This was to stop rat runs and enhance pedestrian safety. I would like to understand how the Council's Traffic Management Committee has come to the conclusion that with this proposal, there would be no material impact to the traffic flow or parking in the area. I've not had access to the traffic report, and the Council's report does not give reasons for the compliance. From a layman's view, I can see bottlenecks occurring, especially at peak times of morning and afternoon. Add this to the current drop-off and collections for school children at the tennis court, which runs, by the way, from 8 AM to 10 PM most nights. And there are multiple council collections each week. We will suffer greatly during the construction phase, and the amount of trucks and equipment that would flow into the street and the loss of on-street parking that would occur for these work zones. And finally, point 3, the boundary zone. As council is aware, the western side of Wheatley is under Willoughby Council control. They are currently zoned R2. There are no references to the residents on this side about possible impact, apart from a small paragraph stating council sees no impact to amenity. Can the council confirm if the residents who are directly opposite the proposed development have had the same notifications and information that the eastern residences have had access to, and their views and concerns taken into account? Again, I'd ask the council to review the sheer bulk and footprint of the development and look at amending to a more sensible size and mix so that no one is disadvantaged and the proposal is totally compliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, there's just a couple of issues there. The traffic report, I would have thought the traffic report is on the internet. So can I just inquire of the, Kim, are you there from council? No.
I could not see it, unfortunately.
Okay, well, perhaps we can get, by the end of this item, we might be able to give clarification. I can see Kim is there, so could we have him contacted to understand whether, in fact, the traffic report was on the website, please, Robin. And with respect to notification, you read the council officer's report?
Yes.
Yes, and the notification, it would appear, was made to those on the opposite side of Wheatley, even though we do know it's in a different council area, and that was mentioned, but there was notification made to the opposite side.
Right.
Yeah. So did you receive notification?
Some of the residents that I know that live on the other side didn't receive any notification, so that's all I'm concerned with. But if you said they were, that's fine.
Well, yes, Veronique?
Yeah, just a comment. Looking at my submission page, there seems to be a number of submissions that were made from the Willoughby side.
Sorry.
But, I do suggest that council officers do check that it is part of the notification system, as it were, when it's on the other side of council.
Well, the report says that it is. So
well, I'll have to take that into. I'll have to take that to be true then.
Yeah,
and I do see some submissions as well.
Well, I think the submissions were there because the residents on our side of the street had gone to notify them. But I'm pretty sure at least 2 or 3 residences stated that they didn't have any formal notification from council.
You can be assured that we'll check that prior to determination, but there would have been a notice on the site, I presume.
Correct.
North Sydney.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one
Yes.
thing to that subject. It's council's general practice when something is on the boundary that we write to the corresponding council and seek their comments.
Thank you. Okay then, rightio.
If I could add to that as well. So I'm speaking as the owner of the property 23 to 27 Wheatley Street.
Can I? Oh, sorry. Yes. Are you on my list to speak to us?
I am on the list.
So what's your name? Sorry.
My name is Manny.
Manny. Okay, Manny. Yeah, sure. The development manager. Yes. You'll have the opportunity of responding following hearing from the submitters.
Sure. Happy to wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And now I'll move to Edward James. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My wife, Jane Beath James, and I are co-owners of the adjoining number 29 Wheatley Street, which is also being developed as an R3 property. The property's been in my wife's family since 1962. And we will retain one dwelling as our sole residence. So we'll remain neighbours to the development. Just before I go on, my understanding of the issue that Neil raised just now about neighbour notification is that neighbours were notified of the revised submission. They were not notified. I don't believe they were notified of this meeting and the opportunity to speak at this meeting. But I'm not entirely sure of that. That's the position they were certainly notified of the revised and there was a notice posted of the revised development.
So they would have been advised of the original development too.
Yes, so they would have been advised. They were advised of the original, and many submitted objections.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
I'll just move on. In regard to your clause 4.6, application for height increase, I think it's obvious that in North Sydney, the height limit for an R3 development is 8.5 metres. I think it's obvious that even at that height, it's not possible to include 3 floors without lowering the ground level. Wheatley Street is a suburban street, rather out of place nowadays, but it has well manicured gardens, all of which are at grade except for a few other, I think 2 other multi-unit developments, one of which has a depressed garden. It's my impression that depressed gardens invariably lose functionality compared to at-grade gardens, and that they are entirely inappropriate to this neighbourhood. The eastern side of Wheatley Street is already about 70 centimetres below the street level. The intention is to lower the gardens by another 45 centimetres in order to go somewhere close to the height rule. So they will have about 1.2 metres. They will be about 1.2 metres below footpath level at the northern end, and 45 centimetres below our garden and floor plate, which is at the original ground level. So that's enough for that. So the point being that we believe that a 2-storey development would be much more in keeping with the street. Secondly, there is an intent to discharge the OSD tank from the development by pump out. Well, that's my interpretation of what's going to happen, because the water has to go uphill, up Wheatley Street to Donnelly Road, and then down Donnelly Road to stormwater pits. So the question is, when, if that is the case, when was the rule about gravity discharge from OSD tanks relaxed by North Sydney Council? And if that rule is relaxed, what is the issue when the pump fails, which it will sooner or later, or the power will be cut or whatever? Council, for good reason, usually requires forward egress from car parking areas. My interpretation of the turning movements in the car park is that if a visitor enters and does not find a car space, he will have to back out. I think a traffic engineer should at least review that situation and, if necessary, provide a turntable, as we were required to do for our development. Importantly, previous submissions have argued that raising the rear garden levels by 700 millimetres or more will damage 2 mature eucalyptus trees located on the fence line adjoining gardens, on the eastern fence line of the development, that is. In my view, that must not be permitted, but there has, although submissions were made, there's been no attempt to change that in the latest submission, other than to provide a swale at the rear garden fence line of, I think, 1.5 metres for other reasons. But the majority of the root bowl of these trees will still be affected. The reason being that they are located right on the fence line. Immediately to the east of them, there is a retaining wall of 2 metres. So they have nowhere for the roof bowls to go other than to the west, which is into the the gardens of 23 to 27. The raising by 700 millimeters won't kill the trees, in my opinion, but it will certainly affect their health. I have not seen an arborist report, or rather, if the arborist report supports this solution, I think there should be an independent arborist report called. In fact, I feel so strongly about this matter because the trees are sort of important to the neighbourhood that I'll take legal action if no change is made to the drawings as they exist. So in summary, my positions are that the clause 4.6 exception should be denied. The ground level should be retained at the existing grade, and the building should therefore be 2 floors plus a basement. All garden spaces should be, because of the neighbourhood, all garden spaces should be substantially at existing levels, there should be a traffic engineer's verification that forward egress is possible in all circumstances from the car park arrangements. In conclusion, I request that the panel defers making a decision on the application today, or this week for that matter, until these matters can be properly addressed, and ask for further design amendments to improve compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. I now have Lara Norges.
Is that a...
Is Lara there?
Are we on? Can you hear us?
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Lara Norges, and this is my son, Michael. We have lived at 21 Whitley Street for the past 29 years. Not to miss things, I'm going to read through what I've prepared. Unfortunately, as you can see, Michael is with me and I'm advocating on his behalf because he has no speech and he's a quadriplegic with cerebral palsy. We extended our house to provide him with quality living space because Michael has no choice other than to spend day and night at home. These complex circumstances are why I request the panel carefully consider the full impact of this proposal on our home. I do not feel that my concerns have been properly addressed in the council's report. There are 2 major key points I'm addressing: loss of solar access. The report argues that the loss of solar access to Michael's living room is acceptable. I urge the panel to examine the solar access perspective because the drawings, as they clearly show, a huge loss of sunlight to those windows. The only time of the day there will be a quantity of solar access which reasonably meets the intent of the control is between 1 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. It's 1.5 hours per day. I do not believe that the small amount of solar access provided at some point of the day is enough to satisfy the overall objective of this planning control, which is to ensure that all dwellings have reasonable access to sunlight and daylight. That includes our house. In my submission, I also stated that it was very hard to assess the solar access impact on the other living room. Perspective drawings have incorrectly labeled Michael's bedroom as a living room, but living room number 2 is towards the middle of the house. The window has been drawn so small, it is impossible to work out how much solar access this living room will be left with. Yeah, Michael is confirming my speaking out on his behalf. So the second key point is non-compliance with planning controls. The council report argues that some of the non-compliances with planning controls are acceptable. I disagree. They are all combined to result in an overdevelopment of the site. I'm concerned that a non-compliance with the height control is considered acceptable. It's almost 1 meter difference. There has been no change to the adequate floor-to-floor height noted by the Design Excellence panel. Why should this proposal not be required to achieve compliance with the landscaped area control, given how many trees are going to be sacrificed? Why should council allow this development to provide in excess to the maximum parking standards when more parking invites more vehicles and more congestion? The amended proposal does not go far enough to achieve a good dwelling mix. Out of the 10 townhouses, 9 of them will still have 4 bedrooms each. It's totally unacceptable because council said the total number of dwellings should be reduced to a mix of dwellings provided to improve separation from adjoining properties, particularly to the dwelling to the south, which is our house. I do not understand why council has not pursued this reasonable request further. And I'm absolutely imploring the panel and requesting that the decision will be deferred on the application today and ask for further design amendments which will work to make this a much more neighborly development. It is our wish that Michael is supporting me that the living room in our house retain quality solar access and quality outlook rather than looking at the 2 or 3 meter height of blank wall. That this is going to be our very, very sad reality. We'll be looking at just dead wall, no light, no nothing. It's going to be imperatively changing our quality of life, especially Michael. So please remember that Michael and I have no choice but to spend many hours in our home, and please help us to protect our quality of life and oblige with the actual council planning. So my also, okay, apologies. My big, oh no, it's just, okay. I wanted to say something, but Michael gives you his beautiful smile so everybody can see what a gorgeous young man you are with his support guide. Well, the major concern is with digging so much into the ground. I'm wondering, this house is going to be 100 years old. We bought it almost 30 years ago. What effect it will have on the foundations of my property and, well, our property, and what steps are going to be taken to protect us in that way. If something will go wrong, where we'll end up. So we'll finish my part, and I do hope that everybody on the panel is going to take a very careful look at all of the concerns being voiced by my previous speakers on the matter.
Thank you very much, Lara. I will now move to the applicants team, which is the architect, Mahit Kenny. Are you there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, then if you can turn your yes. And I've got Manny Hunjan.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. You can turn your camera on. Thank you. And Kerry Gordon.
I'm here, and if possible, I would go first, and then the other two.
Yes. And in addressing the panel, I would like, in particular, Kerry, to address the issues that have been raised by the neighbours. Thank you.
Yes,
Not
not a
in
problem.
terms of exhibition, but in terms of impacts.
That's fine. I was intending to do that. Basically, we're happy with the recommendation. We've got a couple of conditions we would like to query. We think there's a couple of errors in them. And then I'd like to address the submissions. What I first want to say is that we've been working hand in hand with council to come up with this design. We did it pre-DA. We also amended after design excellence panel comments and council's comments. We started off with 11, we ended up with 10. So starting with comments of Mr. Forbes from 31 and wanting it to be reduced to 8 dwellings. The site is 3 allotments and we're proposing 10 dwellings on the 3 allotments. Mr. James's site at 29 is 1 allotment and has approval for 4 dwellings. The similar size allotment, which was originally the 3 allotments that Mr. Forbes is in, number 31, contains 3 dwellings on the same size allotment. So in the context of the number of dwellings surrounding us, 10 is an acceptable level. In fact, if we did a similar design to the approved design at 29, we would get 12 dwellings. So yes, the dwellings are larger, but we have reduced the number of dwellings to address the fact that they're larger. Secondly, in terms of dwelling mix, the dwelling mix controls require that 2 different types of dwellings be provided when the site has a small number of dwellings such as this. And we satisfy that control, that dwelling mix control. I'll talk about the height probably later in terms of the 4.6 discussions that were provided by the neighbour at 21. In terms of the driveway, townhouses typically provide a single driveway. The removal of the other 2 driveways will add additional parking on the street, which is beneficial to the neighbours. And the traffic report has been considered by council and is considered to be acceptable. Yes, it is a small street and a one-way street, but the amount of traffic on that street comes nowhere near the environmental capacity of the street and therefore complies with the requirements in terms of traffic. In terms of construction traffic, there's a condition requiring us to do a construction traffic report, which will be done. It's acknowledged that the street is narrow and the construction traffic report will look at ways of dealing with that. Moving on to the concerns of Mr. James at number 29. I know his development well because I did the statement for him. So I know exactly what's going to be going on his property. One of his concerns was that council has accepted a pump out system on this site. The reason that council has accepted pump out on this site was that we're on the lower side of the street, so therefore we drain to the rear. The property to the rear has substantive trees around the townhouses, which was referred to by Mr. James. And if we were to take a line through that property to Donnelly Street, we would need to remove a significant number of trees. We have a similar issue if we try to take it through other properties. And this was the best way of resolving the stormwater without taking the trees out and having a detrimental impact. Council's engineers agreed with that and the planners, and that was one of the main issues we discussed at our pre-DA, which approach we should take in terms of drainage. So that's why we've gone to the pump out system. In terms of the concern about visitors needing to back out, the application's been assessed against the Australian standard and satisfies the Australian standard, and council's traffic engineer is satisfied that the layout is appropriate. There were concerns raised originally and they have been addressed.
Just on that point, can I ask you, when you say it's been assessed by the traffic engineers, but at the same time, will it require any backing out onto the street?
The visitor parking spaces are located towards the centre. There are the standard 1 metre ends extensions of the aisles at either side, and it may take more than a 3-point turn, but not significantly more than a 3-point turn. And there's no way that anyone would attempt to back up a very steep ramp. They would definitely turn within the basement.
Yeah, so if I could just add, there are swept paths provided for every parking space, and they're all perform to Australian standards.
Yeah, just one moment. If for example, the visitor parking spaces are taken up, how do people know before they drive down? Is there a traffic?
They don't know, like any other townhouse development, but what is different in this townhouse development is the width of the aisles. So normally an aisle width would be 5.8 metres and our aisles are 6.7 to 8 metres. So that gives the additional manoeuvring room that would be necessary if a car comes down and all the spaces are filled.
Okay, thank you.
So the next concern was
just before you move on, you'll probably cover, you might go back to it, but you mentioned that the pump out was because of the protection of trees to the rear. What about the raised height of the rear gardens? Has that been assessed, and has there been a supplementary arborist report in that regard?
Yes, that was the one I was just about to do. So council raised that concern in its initial assessment, and we did additional work, including arborist reports, and the arborist looked at those trees, looked at the level that they're planted at, and because of the slope towards the rear, they're planted at a lower level, and it's considered that the roots won't be impacted because of the fact that they are at a lower level, and providing that additional setback from the rear is adequate in terms of not smothering the trees with additional soil on top of their roots. So the arborist report suggested that the design was appropriate for those trees, because all along we've been trying to protect those trees, and council's landscape architect has agreed with that assessment.
Okay, and I presume that report is on the portal?
I'm assuming so. I've read it before it was submitted, so I know it exists, but I'm assuming it's on the portal because that's where it would have been lodged when we amended the plans.
You lodged it on the portal, okay.
So
I am sorry to butt in here, but if that is the case, there must be an independent arborist report. That is nonsense.
Thank you. We don't, it's not a question and answer, but Mr. James, I did allow you to speak then, but we hear what you said before. Yep, very well. Yes.
I can't answer that other than to say that I take advice from the arborist experts and council is satisfied. The request for deferral, I'll deal with later. I don't think there is anything that needs to be deferred. I think council and the developer have worked very closely together to get this to a suitable level for the site. The final submissions were on behalf of number 21. The first concern was about solar access to the living room, and I'd like you to go to page 124 of the report, which addresses solar access. So the council raised this concern originally in their original assessment and also at the pre-DA, and we've been working extremely hard to improve the solar access retention to this property.
Just one moment, 124?
Yes.
I don't have a 124.
Maybe the numbers we have are different. It's the attachments, the plan attachments.
All right, okay, one moment. So what's it entitled?
Let me just find the time.
Oh, I do have
the shadow diagrams.
Yep.
So, and it's the elevational shadow diagrams, and they're for the times 11:30 to 2:30, the ones that I'm talking about. So,
okay, then perhaps the architect can share that with us on the screen.
I don't have it on my computer.
That's okay. I can do that. I'll just get it up.
Okay.
Okay.
I have the report. I can share the report.
Okay, is that shared?
No, no, not yet.
Okay.
Peter, are you there to enable Kerry to share?
Has that got me there?
Yes, that's there, thank you.
Okay, so this is the adjoining property number 21. Our understanding, and the neighbour may have corrected this, but I wasn't quite sure I understood where she was saying her son's living room was. My understanding was that these two rooms at the back were living rooms and that this one was a living room, but it now appears that this one may be her son's bedroom. I'm not sure. And if that's the case, I'm assuming that this one here is the living room that she's referring to, but that's only an assumption.
Okay, well, let's confirm with Lara. You there, Lara?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I don't know. Oh, yes, I can move. Well, this is the living room. This is a
Sorry, no,
special.
just the first one where the cursor is now. What's that?
This is the patio. This is patio where it is Michael's living room.
Living room.
The next one here is the bedroom. This is a common lounge room.
And this is the lounge room.
Yeah.
So your son's living
This is
room,
my son's living space.
room, and then
bedroom,
lounge room.
And bedroom.
Bedroom.
Lounge room is the common lounge room. This is a specially designed room. My son uses electric wheelchair. His room, which is his bedroom and living space, coming out onto the patio, which has got huge big glass windows to protect him from environments like rain today, where he spent most of his day there. He would be totally void of light.
Okay, is the patio at the front or the back of the house?
Back.
So it's back. So this is the patio. And this is
patio, correct.
And this here is
his living room, bedroom.
His living room.
Bedroom.
Living
and
room,
bedroom.
Yes.
And this is the lounge room.
This is common living room.
Okay.
Common. Yeah, that's not the sun's. The sun's is a front
That's not my
large
son.
windows
No.
of the TV.
Okay. So what we were looking at doing was retaining as much solar access to those three windows that we've been discussing as possible. This is the shadow diagram at 11:30. Now, what I need to clarify is that the blue that is shown was shadow that was originally occurring in the original set of plans that was reduced in the amended set of plans after council sought us to increase the solar access. So it's this grey line here that shows you the impact on the solar access. So at 11:30, the solar access would occur
of light coming soon.
Sorry, if I could just
now just allow the presenter. We've heard your submission. I asked for clarification, but we must now listen to what the planner is telling us. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the combination of the white and the blue is the solar access that will be achieved to the spaces. As you can see, the upper level of the windows are in solar access, so the sun will project further into the room than if the lower level of the windows were getting solar access. So that's at 11:30, and this is at 2:30. So what we were doing was showing the 3 hours of the greatest level of solar access. Again, this is the patio out the back, and the blue and the white are solar access. There's less solar access on this room at that time, but it still achieves some. And there's less solar access at this room, but it still achieves some. But the thing to note is that these other rooms also receive solar access at other times. So what we were trying to do is show the solar access on the back two rooms largely from this point of view. I can also take you then to the other shadow times so that you can see the solar access at the other times outside of this 3 hour window that we were talking about. I think I have to stop sharing and then find it and then start sharing again.
So in fact, what we've been shown, just for the submitter's knowledge, what we've been shown is the worst case scenario in the middle of winter for those windows.
For those particular hours as well.
Yeah. So are you going to show us now?
Yep, so I'm just going to share screen again. Okay, share screen. Share. Okay, so these are at other times. Yes, solar access will be lost at 9 o'clock in the morning to those windows and to the rear two windows at 10. By 10 o'clock, the lounge room starts retaining solar access. And remembering that one has less solar access at 2:30, but it starts to get solar access earlier in the day. We then go up to the 11 o'clock period. And whilst the rear rooms don't get quite as much, they still do get deep solar access through the high parts of the window, and this other living room gets almost total solar access at 11 o'clock. Moving down, this is the 3 o'clock. So those two rear rooms still get some level of solar access at 3 o'clock, because remember, it's the blue and the white, and this other room doesn't. So all three windows retain solar access for more than 3 hours to some part of the window and large parts of the window for 3 hours during the day. And that's what council assessed as being acceptable, remembering that the control requires solar access to be retained to one living room, not every living room in the house. The other thing I'll say is that we've done an awful lot of work on that, in that the, can you still see if I scroll?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So I don't have to keep going in and out. So the plans have been amended quite a bit. As you can see from this plan here, which is another version of the shadow diagram, this is the 9 o'clock one, there is a significant setback provided on our property adjoining the dwelling with the front row of dwellings. So that setback is, let me just double check. I think from memory, it's 2.8 metres setback. It actually might be, I'll go up to the floor plan just so I'm not giving the wrong advice. So remembering the setback requirement is a maximum of 2.5 for any development where the wall height is over 7 metres. Where it's under 7 metres, it's 1.5. So as you can see, we've stepped the development down significantly there, and we've got a very large setback there from that adjoining property. And that was done wholly and solely to get as much solar access as we could into that property. We've done an awful lot of work on it. If we go to this, so the setback at the front is 4.8 metres and the setback at the rear is 2.8 metres. So at the front, it's almost double what we're required to provide, and at the back, it's higher than what we're required to provide as well. And we've also lowered the height substantially of the front portion of the building closest to that neighbour to maximise solar access. So we could have gone in and said, look, we only need to satisfy one window, but we have tried our best to give solar access to all 3 windows because we understand the condition of the neighbour's son. So that's what we've done in terms of solar access. In terms of...
Just one other question, sorry, Kerry, while we're on this. And at this point where the building is closest to the boundary,
yes,
then there's no, is there any exceedance in the height?
No. So the exceedances are on the north, and all of the elements on that southern facade are compliant. So no exceedances result in any solar access impacts.
Okay, right, yeah.
Off the side. And the exceedances are basically at the, I'll go to the first floor, are in these elements here. So they're at the rear elements and the lift overruns. The lift overruns exceed on the northern side by a maximum of 1 metre and comply on the southern side. They're 8.5 metres at that point. The roof elements over the bathrooms breach by up to 800 millimetres. They comply on the southern side, breach by up to 800 millimetres on the northern side. But again, you'll see we've got a 4.6, nearly a 4.7 metre setback to that breaching element from the property at 29 because the level below has a flat roof over it. And you can see that in the montage where we've specifically lowered the height adjoining the neighbours, actually I think it's further down, to minimise their impact and also to provide more modulation in the street. That was one of the things that the design excellence panel asked us to do. And so we did that. And you can see at this point the degree of impact in terms of the breach of the height control. And while I'm here, I may as well talk about the front yard level. The dotted red line is the existing level, and this line here is the finished floor level. So the finished floor level of the front dwellings are almost exactly at existing ground level. So all we have done is levelled out the front yards a bit, which is relatively standard practice. Even if the front yards were kept sloping, the building would not be changed in terms of height or its presentation to the street because it's constructed at ground level. And I'll just find the montage so I can show you that. Sorry, a lot of plans. So that's the montage taken from 2 positions. So that's taken from adjoining number 21 here. And you can see the large step down there and the significant side setbacks that have been provided. And then that step down is matched on the other side, adjoining number 29. And any breaches of height control are back at this point here. So hopefully that's you can understand how that relates to the street. And yes, the building does look slightly lower, but then the building is at ground level existing. It's just the gardens that we've changed. And that wouldn't be readily discernible as you view it from the street.
Can I just before you go on, can I just ask, are there any other panel members that have a question at this point?
No.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Lloyd, you go.
No, I'm fine.
I'm just curious about the alignment of these units because I can't make it work. With say where the disabled parking is in the basement, and then the disabled units above, because it looks like the two most northern units on the ground level are disabled, but they don't seem to align with the disabled car parking in the basement below. And I'm also intrigued as to how the bedrooms above are going to be able to be made disability friendly.
So each townhouse has a lift in it.
Yep.
Which means that the first floor can be accessible.
Yep, but the bedrooms, there's not enough movement space for a wheelchair in that one. I can see.
It was my understanding that it was checked in terms of accessibility and was found to be appropriate. They're quite generous bedrooms. Those beds that are shown are king size beds. In most of the rooms, they're not double beds. So it probably makes them look smaller than they are.
But just
in terms of the parking
for door openings and things. So if you go down to the base, just go to the first question and go down to the basement.
Yep. So, yep. So the townhouse 6, which is the first accessible one, has a parking space that's 3.38 metres wide.
But if you look at the two car parking things that are shown as disabled, they don't go up to the ones that are shown as disabled on the ground floor.
Number 7 is shown as accessible. Let me just go to the ground floor and check.
Yeah, 7 is, but 6 isn't.
Okay.
6 isn't in the car parking sense.
Sorry, if I could just jump in. I think that disabled sign should be on the next one, number 8. Sorry, that was
but you need more space.
Hangover from the changes that we made. So when we first went in, it was 6 and 7, but then when we amended the drawings, we've made 6 and 8 as the disabled. So I think that sign just needs to be moved over.
So that should be on this one rather than
the first one, 6.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, 6. 6 should be moved up to 8.
It should be 7 and 8.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see the disability assessment of the upper levels as well.
Well, I might let Mo answer that after I finish with the rest, because he's the architect, so that's his expertise rather than mine. The neighbours raised concern with the non-compliance with the landscape control. And I'll take you quickly to the landscape plan. What it actually shows is that visually we're going to get a lot more landscaping on the site than the requirement. You can see there, these areas have been excluded from the calculation of landscaping, even though that they will present landscaping and we will be getting small trees in there. Our variation to the landscaping control is very small and more than compensated by the provision of the street in between. So what the approach we've taken, just too many plans. I think that might be it. No. Sorry, my computer is taking its time to catch up. Okay, so this is the approach we've taken, and it's the approach that North Sydney Council usually prefers to providing long buildings like the one approved on number 29, which is approved in this shape here. So it's a long rectangular building with very small side setbacks and no break in the middles. So we've taken the 2-row approach so that we can get this landscaped street in the middle. And there'll be small trees in here to break the visual bulk as viewed from the neighbours and also within the site. We've then got landscaping in the front courtyard. The design review panel were concerned about the size of the trees. So the trees have been changed now so that every second courtyard has a canopy tree and every first courtyard has a smaller tree to increase the height of trees in the yard. And then we've got deep soil planting at the rear as well. So that's the intention of the landscape plan, and Council's landscape architect was happy with that. The neighbour was also concerned that she would be looking out to a 3-storey wall, but we've actually got quite a lot of landscaping proposed down that side boundary. And if I go to the detail plan, particularly to provide relief to those walls. And given that we've got a larger setback than we're normally required to provide, we've got the room to do that landscaping. So in time, the building will be significantly softened by that landscaping along there. This hatch area here, just so that you know, is a right-of-way in favour of the neighbouring property. And rather than using that, because originally we were looking at using that for access, we decided to provide a separate access and effectively gift the right-of-way to the neighbour so that they're the only ones that are going to be using it. The only other thing... Sorry?
While you're there, can you just point out where the indoor-outdoor space for where people in the front row might actually sit outside and have a barbecue and eat, and also where anyone's going to have a line to dry their clothes?
These rear areas here are the service areas. So they've been treated that way and there will be lines in those service areas. We've also got the bins in those service areas as well.
So you're going to hang your clothes above the bins, are you?
Not above the bins, no, in the other areas. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mohit. Yep. The front areas are the more usable areas. Yep. And I've just looked at the landscape plan and they probably are a little overplanted. They probably need to have a bit more grass in there to use coming off the living areas. But the areas all comply with the requirements in terms of the size of areas for the dwellings. So I think it's just a matter of maybe a condition taking out a bit of the excess planting and putting in some grass and the like for it to be used by the occupants. I think I've pretty much, the only other thing that the neighbour raised concern with was the impact of excavation on her dwelling. The basement is set back between 2 and 2.8 metres from the side boundary, and then the dwelling next door is set back behind their driveway. So the actual distance between the excavation for the basement and that property is really quite large, and dilapidation report conditions have been put on. So I don't think there's any particular concern there beyond normal concerns with construction. And I think the dilapidation report can address that. I'll stop sharing because you probably want me to. So other than that, there's just a couple of conditions that we have concerns with the wording of. The first one is condition C3. Well, actually it's two, C3 and C4, which are the dilapidation report conditions. There's no concern with doing the dilapidation report. The only concern is that there's words in there that say that the person doing them have to be agreed with the neighbours. Now, given the number of neighbours that we have, because we've got townhouses at the back as well, the possibility of us agreeing with an expert with the neighbours is probably unlikely. And there's no way for us to deal with that if we can't get an agreement. The conditions require it to be suitably qualified professional. They specify the professionals. So we would just like the words as agreed between the applicant and the neighbour removed. Happy to do it, happy to get the appropriate professional to do it. Just not reasonable for the neighbours to basically be able to hijack who's chosen and hold up the process if they don't agree, because there's no out for us if they don't agree. If they don't agree, we can't proceed with the project. That's different to the second part of that contention.
If just one moment, just in terms of you have no objection to giving the neighbours a copy of the dilapidation report, though?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
The second part of that process says that if the neighbours don't allow access, then we have an out in that we can provide council with information as to the refusal of access. Whereas the agreement with the neighbours on the professional, there's no out. It stops the development if they say no, they don't agree. So that we're just requesting that that be reworded so that that's not the case. The only other condition that we have concerns with is C20, which is the drainage condition, and it's quite beyond my level of expertise. But there's a whole lot of referral to works in number 31 Wheatley, which I think the neighbour would not be very happy with if we did our stormwater works their property. Our stormwater works are going along the footpath. So I think there's some wording problems with that condition. I think that condition might have been cut and paste from the approval next door at 29. And do we have our engineer that can talk to that condition? Because they would be better suited than me to talk to it.
No,
I do have to jump off.
Okay, Mohit, can you address that? You probably understand the drainage better than I do.
I think even more than me, a client has been more involved in direct discussions with council's engineers with regards to the stormwater drainage. But what I understand is the drainage is going to be run in the footpath between the verge and the property boundary. So it's not going out into the street or into the curb, but it's going to run into the footpath and then down to Donnelly. And then it's going to get connected to the stormwater system there. So one of the condition requires that that work's got to be undertaken for the entire length of Wheatley Street for up to 600 mils from the curb into toward the middle of the road. I think a comment to that is that, that's probably not necessary because we are not really doing work out on the street. But the work is actually happening on the footpaths, and our client's happy to replace the footpath, obviously, once that work is completed.
And I think the other concern, sorry.
One moment, just in terms of C20, where is it talk about number 30 or 31
okay.
J?
So I'll just
I've got it, J.
But there's also a reference in there. We just think the wording might have been taken from the other one and not checked carefully enough, because there's also a wording that we've got to achieve the drainage by gravity feed, and we're pumping out, so it's impossible. Yeah, okay. So I just think that whole condition just needs to be double checked by the engineer and the wording adjusted appropriately, because we're not doing works on 31. They wouldn't want it and we don't want it. And also the gravity feed issue.
Right, okay, yep. Continue on.
I think I think I've addressed everything else, unless there was a question that the panel had. I think I've addressed all of the comments made by the neighbours. Oh, clause 4.6. I've addressed that in passing. I've identified the areas that are of breach. And basically they just relate to the fact that the site slopes towards the back and there's a small part of the front building that doesn't comply as a result of it. We have lowered the building as much as possible in discussions with council, but we can't lower it any lower because we have to chase the slope with the driveway, and we've got the driveway slope at the maximum steepness. It doesn't add to providing any more habitable space. It's really just the roof and the lifts. So, we'd have to make the height in our bathrooms lower to comply, but it really doesn't serve any purpose because it doesn't have any impact on anyone.
Jan, you're on mute.
Yes, so I'll now open it up to other panel members if you have any questions. Lloyd?
Yes, is Mr. James still there? And also Neil, I think.
Yes, I think we're both here.
We're still here.
Lloyd,
yes.
What's your question?
Look, I think in your presentation, you made the point that you felt that this was an overdevelopment of the site.
Yes.
I think both you and Neil made that point. Now, with the explanations given by Kerry, has that modified your view, or do you still feel exactly the same as before?
It hasn't modified my view at all, and I'm sure not Neil's. Kerry made the point that because our property has 4 townhouses approved, then their development is modest. The difference is that in our case, we have small 3-bedroom townhouses. They have rather grand 4-bedroom townhouses. our block size is 667 square meters, whereas the total of their blocks is 1730. So there are two that are significantly smaller. If you do the arithmetic, 10 3-beds would fit. They're putting 10 4-beds in comparison to our site. So no, my view has not changed at all. I guess I'm not permitted to, just on other points of fact. Kerry made the point that it's a one-way street. We believe, I at least believe that it would be better as a one-way street, but in fact it's a two-way street at the moment. And thirdly, since I have the floor, the gravity discharge is, to me, very important. And it can be achieved for that site by placing the OSD tank above ground. I know that's not conventional and it's a little bit difficult architecturally, but it solves the problem. The other way to do that, and I'm not sure why it wasn't done, is that there's a stormwater pit to the south side of the property down Wheatley Street, which is at a much lower level. It seemed to me that it was an easier pit to reach. So there are other solutions than having it pumped out.
Can I just say that this is not a Q&A. You were just asked a question, and that was, and you have answered that more than adequately. Does that satisfy your concerns, Lloyd?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Carolyn, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I suppose in line with my other questions of the other projects today and the desperate need to address climate change and other things, I'm wondering whether you would consider not achieving the bare minimum basics below which it is illegal to build, and perhaps putting your building and your clients and the future occupants into a better position by making it much more energy efficient than the minimum requirement, and also totally electrifying the project so that when gas is cut off, which it will be, it needs to be, that they're not stranded assets, and that perhaps some photovoltaics on the roof would be a very good investment to help offset the emissions of operating the place.
I might leave that to Manny to address because he's on behalf of the applicant.
Yes. Manny, are you there?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Caroline, for the that suggestion as well. It is something that we have considered, and just due to the nature of the commercial side of the project, it wasn't feasible on this site.
I think it is feasible. That's just not an adequate response, because it's actually, and I think that the financial return on properties that are better when compulsory disclosure of energy efficiency, which hopefully will happen this year, comes into play, buildings that are not performing well or performing below what they can will in fact be much less valuable than those that are. And anything being built now, it's just incorrect to say that it's not financially feasible unless you're the HIA or the MBA using the wrong RISs for the NC.
You might have misunderstood what I was saying. That I was more relating that to the cost of construction, which
that's what she's
saying.
Increased, yeah. So yeah, it's something which we had considered previously.
It's just an inaccuracy to say that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Any other questions, Veronique?
No, not for the moment.
No? Okay. Very well. Is there anything further the applicant wishes to present?
No, I think we've addressed everything, unless Mohit, you've got anything else you want to say?
Right. Just a question in terms of the front yards. It was raised by Carolyn about, well, where is the outdoor space in terms of a table or seating or whatever, when we've got just these front areas completely landscaped, which is most commendable, but at the same time, those people do need a private open space area in which they can sit out. So then my next question is also, why couldn't you, given that it is considerably below the ground at the street frontage, why couldn't you at least provide some terrace so that you will see some landscaping in the streetscape, as opposed to it all growing up from the excavated lower level.
And,
I
and
might,
then what the
answer that.
implications on the soft landscaping versus hard landscaping would be.
Yeah, so I might answer that one if I can. So if Kerry, if you do have the landscaping plans available, happy for you to bring those up again, just for the site plan view. So while you do that, you might recall from that plan earlier, there was a circular shape which sits in the front yards of the first 5 properties. So that we're looking to provide a raised section which is like a veranda, but it's actually detached from the terrace itself, and with the intent that that area is going to be used as a seating area with also a table. So it can be potentially moved around, just depending on the location, which the residents want to keep that. It was quite a significant idea which our landscape architects have put forward. Yeah, so you can see if you can see those circles that have so yeah, so each one of those, the circles that have been provided. So that's the area that's been provided for seating.
Just wondering if it's better shown on the schematic information.
No, that was like a conceptual idea.
Yeah, so it was a conceptual idea, and because it's loose furniture, we didn't show it on the council plans. It was unneeded, but it is shown. I mean, not that it's of concern of the panel, but it is shown on our marketing drawings that we're preparing at the moment.
Can I just say, if that's a concern of the panel, there are possibilities to reduce the landscaping in terms of plant details and heights and put some lawn in there, which would allow for that.
Yeah.
And if the panel was to condition that, then that would be achieved.
At the end of the day, it'll probably end up as paving if that happens, I would have thought, rather than soft landscaping, and you're having trouble with your meeting that. So no further questions on this matter. We've spent a lot of time on it and heard from everybody. Hope everyone feels like they've been well represented. So we shall close this matter for now, and we will move on to the next matter. As I said earlier, the panel's decision will be on the internet by close of business on Friday, generally, if not Monday afternoon. So thank you all for assisting the panel in your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. And
Jane, can I just say that the next item, all the rest of the items are not open to the public.
Oh, yes, sorry. Okay, then, right. So that completes our public meeting of this North Sydney Local Planning Panel. We'll now move into the other items. Thank you.